Okay, and we're COMP308, and this is week 4, lesson 4, part 3. And I want to talk about an option for you to set up your pages, where you can host your pages. Some of you might have your own domain by now. I want to start with that. Later on in the class, we'll talk about more of Jquery and Ajax. I want to talk about those two technologies because as we move forward, a lot of stuff we're going to be doing is using Ajax, right? And if you don't know Ajax and Jquery, then we can't build, right? We have to be able to build and use those two technologies. That's why I'm bringing them up today. And then as we move into the next assignment, which is going to be coming up next week, you need to use those two technologies. So those are the two things we're going to talk about today. Again, in the first part, for those people who aren't here, I looked at your projects, your first assignment 1, which is again 15% of your mark. I'm going to be moving the date, the due date, to Saturday at midnight, just to give you guys a break. Seeing as that you guys have a lot of other assignments on the go at the same time. All right, so one of the things we can do with GitHub is you can go to Github Pages. Once you have an account with GitHub, what you can do is you can use it's hosted directly from your GitHub repository, and it really is the I/O page. So again, it works with Foundation, it works with other frameworks that are out there. So you don't have to use you know, as an example, a page here at school, and it's a little faster than the school server, right? Now, one thing it can't do is it can't host a CMS. That's the one thing you cannot do. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. So you have a couple of options. You can use a user or organizational site or a project type site. There's 2 different ways of setting this up. And again, this is if you go to pages.github.com, it gives you the way of how to do this, all right? So if you go to user or organization site, which is you create a repository, like it says, and the repository has to end with github.io, right? And the first part of the repository is your username. So example for me, right, and I've kind of put a stub together for you guys to see it today. It's my name.github.io would be my page if it was live, and this is what it would look like, right? I just kind of put together a page for you guys to see, kind of thing, right? And again, it doesn't really do anything right now, but as an example, I just have a couple of stubs in there to show you this is live. I'm hosting it live from GitHub. Now, one thing I did do is I took my domain name, which is my last name.com, right, and I pointed it to the GitHub pages. So even though, and you can do that. So you have your own domain, whatever it's called, right? You can point it to your GitHub pages so it looks like it's hosted. You've got your professional site. Okay? So that's one thing you can do. And there's some tricks on how to do this kind of thing. So that's the first thing you do. You create a repository. It has to be your username.github.io. That's the first piece. So let's do that together. So if you haven't done it already, go there and create your username.github.io, where your username is the username on GitHub. Okay? It's an empty repository.
If I already have something there, I can just delete it.
If you have a username, whatever your username is, .github.io, then you certainly can delete it, and then you'll be putting things out. You can actually delete the repository and then do a new repository based on that. That's the best way to do it. So that's the first thing. So let's do that. So if you've got you should have an empty repository. So again, it's whatever your username is, .github.io. All right? That's the first piece. Are we all there? So it's a free kind of page. You can host free, right? I mean, again, you're not, most of these are student sites you're using. A lot of times what you want to do is the page you're making on GitHub is you want to make it related to some of the code you're doing on GitHub. That's the whole idea. You're not going to typically you won't host on GitHub unless it's related to what you're doing, right? But it's okay for us students. We're creating a page that has GitHub links. Makes sense. A little bit of portfolio about what you do. It's okay. Okay, or even a game. You can list it on GitHub as well. But what if you have more than one? This only does one, right? So this portfolio site would be the one, right? Well, obviously you'd have sublinks, and your portfolio site would point to other pages, and so on. But if you point to GitHub pages, it won't link like you normally think, because it's a GitHub page, and you're hosting within the GitHub page. It'll just take you to the GitHub site, right? So be careful how you do this. Okay, so that's the first piece. Next piece. What kind of Git client are you using? So again, for us, we're going to be using Visual Studio. Now here's the challenge. If you use Visual Studio, it gives you a bunch of extraneous detail or stuff that that it'll give you extra information, because Visual Studio, when I create a project in Visual Studio, I'm just going to go there right now and do it. So let's say I'm going to shut down this application that I was working on with the COMP308. Yeah. Yeah, but it's not ready yet. Right. So you see, you're too quick, man. Yeah. The repository's got to be your account number, your account name, whatever your account name is, .github.io. That's what it's got to say. Your repository has to be shaped that way. All right. So again, I'm going to go. If I go new project, right, and I'm going to start a new web project here, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, Web Application 3. It doesn't matter what I call it, right? And when I do this, really quickly, it has all this extraneous data. Like, for example, I've got my pages, but I also have this properties, references, this config, all this extra information here that I don't need, right? And remember, my pages, when I create this, if I actually physically go and look at what my pages would look like, it's going to go to GitHub the exact way that you see here. Now, this is Web Application 3. So if I go and see Web Application 3, you're going to see this. That doesn't give me a page on GitHub. I don't want this to go to GitHub. I want what's in here to go to GitHub, right? And it's got to be something that's, you know, an index.html file with some CSS and JavaScript and so on. So this is what you want to do. So when you sync up to GitHub, you've got to make sure that you exclude pieces of your page that does not work. This is the first time we're going to use our gitignore file, because our gitignore file will tell us, or we can uninclude files when we create our link. We can untrack them. And we don't want them to be tracked, because if you track those files, as an example, right, it won't produce the right result. Hear me when I'm saying this. So if you do it for Visual Studio, there's a problem. But there's nothing that says, and we also, remember last time we also did this where we have a link, our GitHub little app for GitHub that we can use. And that's another way you can do it. So again, there's a bunch of choices here to help you out. One is a terminal where you do this, right? And basically what you're doing is you're cloning your repository online to a folder within your GitHub, within your local files. If you have GitHub for Windows, then what you want to do is you want to set up in desktop. You want to click that, and then it'll launch your GitHub for Windows, and then it'll create the repository physically in your local system, right? That's another way to do it. GitHub for Mac is slightly the same. If you put I don't know, right, then it tells you, hey, download GitHub for your system. Mine's Mac. So let's go with GitHub for Windows. That's the one we go with. That's the second one. What you want to do is you want to create your index.html file and everything else just like you normally would. So it has to have an index file, and it has to be an index.html file in your project. Okay? And then what you do is commit and sync. And once you've done that, right, you know, you're good to go. That's all it takes. So those are the steps, really. As long as you have your index.html on the front part of your GitHub, there's no secondary folder you've got to drill down into, you're good to go. Does that make sense?
Well, my files are a bit complicated.
Shouldn't be complicated. Even my files are complicated.
So
So well, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have your first page as an index. If you have views and controllers and you have to drill down to find your index.html, I'm just saying, it won't work. That won't work in this context. It has to be a front-facing index.html page. Now, that works with our game, if we're going to make a game together, and that works here with a basic website that we're doing here. You don't have to use views and controllers. That's great that you did that, but if it may not work for you if you're using something that you have to drill down one more level to see your index.html page. Okay? So if I go back to my pages now, so here I know I've got my GitHub pages. Let me take a look at what I've done for you so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's my repository, and inside here I've put in my github.io page down here. So I've listed, it's actually a repository here, right? So if I click on it, this is what my page looks like, right? I still have a bunch of extra information, like for my Visual Studio project, but my index.html page right here, if you see it, is front-facing. It's right here. That's where my index.html page is. It's not 2 levels down. And if you have, this is the other thing you have to do. If you're going to produce a name, again, for your website, like say you have a domain name, a custom domain name of yours, like I do, right? You have to have what's called a Cname file, all right? That's another thing you have to do. It's capital Cname, like this, right? If I look into that file, it has the link. That's all it has to have, the domain of my website, my domain. It has to actually show my domain in there. So if I have those two pieces, right, and of course I have to point my domain, at GitHub, right? That's everything I need to do. And if you look it up, there's a way, if you say, I want to have a custom domain with GitHub Pages, that's what I would look up. I would say custom or domain with GitHub Pages. Right? How do I do that? It says setting up a custom domain with GitHub Pages, and it's part of this GitHub help. Right? So again, it says creating and committing a Cname file. You have to do that. Then you have to configure your custom subdomain with your DNS provider. So whoever your DNS provider is. And then you got to create this, again, an alias or a name, right? And it tells you how to do that with your DNS provider. So there's a bit of extra work here. I'm not going to go through it because it's not required. If all you gave me was your github.io page, like whatever your name is, so my name would be, I don't know, let's say your name was like Vanguard, vanguard.github.io as an example, instead of my last name, Tsidiopoulos. And that's all you gave me as a link to your site, I'd be happy. I'd be okay with it. It doesn't have to be a custom domain. It's nice for you to have it, right? Like if you had your own custom domain name, as an example, just from a professional perspective, it's nice. I'm not going to mark you on it though, right? It's outside of the scope of what we're doing here, right? So, but I just want to give you another vehicle if you don't want to use the GitHub page or the pages here at school because you find the service too slow, or you want to find another hosting service that's free. This is one that is very simple. It doesn't allow you to do, there's no databasing, so you can't add a database or anything like that here in the back end. Not really. There are ways of doing certain things, but anything that has to work locally. Okay, so you can use JavaScript, you can use Jquery, you can use all those kind of things. Any library that you want to use, like for example, my library that I'm using for my my GitHub page, and again, I made a stub, right, is Jquery Mobile. Right? I just made it so that way when we talk about Jquery Mobile coming up, right, then it looks like it's responsive, yeah? It's not responsive. It's actually a Jquery Mobile page. And so this is what it would look like on mobile devices, just like this, right? So if I scrunch it up or whatever, it looks like this, and when I switch, it actually switches over to the other pages, right? So this stays static. It's not a responsive page. And I carried over, so this is another option for you guys when you make stuff for mobile. We're going to talk about that's our next little project we're going to be talking about. How do I make my page, compatible with mobile? 100%. So we're going to target mobile for the next one, right? And it's not going to be responsive. And again, there's these two hybrid solutions you can do, like we talked about. You do Foundation for medium and large screens. I'm saying, or you use Bootstrap for medium and large screens, and then you listen for the type of device that's incoming. And if you know if it's a mobile device, like an iPhone or some kind of Android phone, if it's a phone, right, then you switch out and you make it so it's specifically made for that page. So you can use Ratchet, which is another framework, or Jquery Mobile, all right, which is very common to use. And the Jquery Mobile has lots of little featurettes. It's also a one-page site, one big one-page site. So it's very similar to Foundation, and they work together. Okay. And again, hey, look what I did for my logo for this one, right? All I did here was I took and this is an actual picture of the world, right? I used Blender to map it to a sphere, right? With no shading, and I put my name around it. That's all I did, right? So it wasn't like it's like crazy messed up logo. All I'm doing here is I made something that makes sense, and I want to talk about, hey, if I was going to make a student site for you guys to contact, like maybe I make a contact page so you can contact me for information, this is what I would do. And I had a couple of examples of courses here. Maybe what I would do in this case, because this has changed over the years now, I can make one that says here's Centennial stuff, and then another one that here's Georgian because I do both those colleges, right? So you can click on Centennial, look at your site, and go to your files, and these are all your site files. These are all links to your folders. As an example for, like for example, here's Starbase 12. I made Starbase 12 for COMP308 and for COMP397 last semester. If I click onto it, it'll take you to the code for Starbase 12. This is all my code, right? So you can see where this stuff is. This is actually the index.html file if you want to look at it. If I want to make it link to Starbase 12 so it works, I have to go back. This is the problem with using GitHub Pages. Then I got to make it so that because it won't run. Starbase 12 won't run unless it's my I/O page, right? If I just want to give you the code, yeah, you can see my code. If I want to give you a working page, just working sub-pages, not going to happen. You can't have more than one page on GitHub in an I/O format that will work. Unless, of course, you have multiple accounts. But I'm not going to go there with you. So you could, let's say, for example, I made a Starbase 12. I made a Starbase 12 account, right? So my account was called Starbase 12, right? And then I made a Starbase 12.github.io page. Yes. Then it would work, right? Because it would be a new I/O page for my page, and you can make as many as you want, right? It's not like they're going to limit you. The only challenge is it's like the email address. You know, you're going to track that you have the same email address for multiple repositories. Still, I don't think they stop you here. The fine folks at GitHub don't do that. Any questions around your github.io page, right? I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, I would caution you, if you use Visual Studio and you try and link up Visual Studio to this new page of yours, remember when we go into Team Explorer and I create, and now let's just do it really quickly so I show you what I'm talking about. If I create a new account, or new, I'm just going to go in there and do a new repository here. So let's just do a new dummy repository. Okay, and I go, here, let's just call it dummy. Just so we know I'm going to erase it later. So I go into my new dummy repository, I get my link for it, and I copy it, and I go here and I want to add this solution to source control. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Here it is. And now I want to go into my Team Explorer, and I want to go into commits, changes, and let's say I go initial commit. Take a look at all the stuff. Take all the stuff that it's going to save to GitHub. I have all these files that are going to go, right? This, all this stuff. I want to exclude all this stuff. This isn't things that I want. I don't want assembly information and this project files and all this stuff to go. This is silly. I would never want this stuff to go, right? So this is definitely something I wouldn't want, and I would exclude it all. Now, if I exclude all this stuff, right, and this is my GitHub page, I can't do a commit because I haven't done anything. I haven't added anything. These are all my excluded pages. Okay, let's go into add some other information. Let's say I'm going to add a simple index.html page. So I go in here and I go add HTML page index.html. There it is, okay? And I leave it the way it is. I'm not going to touch it, just to have it as part of my page. Okay, cool. Now I go to Team Explorer and I see that I've added my index.html. So I say initial commit with index.html. Now take a look. These files are all excluded, and I've only included this one file that I want to go to the page. So I'm going to create a commit. I'm going to save everything. This is the only thing that's going to go. And if I go to home and go unsync commits now and kind of put in my URI for dummy and publish, let's go to the dummy page and take a look at it now. What do I got here? Not what I want. Why? Because it also gives me this layer of abstraction. That's not what I want, guys. This isn't going to work. Right? This I don't want. I want my index here. If I don't have my index here, ain't going to work. Your pages will not work, which means you have to upload them in a different way. That's why you need the client for this. You do the client, you take your development piece, the piece for your development pages, and you throw only those folders into the client folder, and then you upload the client information. So this is how it would work. Let's do it manually for myself. So I've got my solution here as an example for my web application 3, and I've got my index.html. This is the only one I want to go up, right? Not the rest of the stuff, right? And if I look at my local pages, right, here's my web application 3, it's this level. And even not all this stuff, just this, right? I have to pick and choose what I want, right? And I can do it manually, and there's some tools for workflow out there that'll help you do it automatically. But we're not going to get there yet, right? Because there's some automatic tools that'll do it for you as well. You can do it by command line nicely, right? Like, for example, Web Application 3, there's two Web Application 3s. There's the outer one, which is my main folder, and there's the inner one, which is my project itself, right? Because they're called the same thing. Look, solution and my project are the same, right? I don't want my solution files to go up there. I want them to be ignored. I don't want that to happen at all. I only want my index.html to go up there. So unfortunately, the easiest way is to do it manually. So this is the only thing I want in there. Okay, so let's go back into my repository, and I'm going to kill my repository and try again. Okay, so I'm going to do this whole thing again for a second for you. So let's kill my repository. So I'm going to go to settings, and I'm going to go to, if you look down, there's danger zone. It says delete the repository. I'm going to delete it, and of course the repository is called dummy, right? And I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, it's gone. Now I go back. I don't have that repository here anymore, right? Okay, I still have this solution. I'm just going to close off this solution file. And let's say, for example, I'm going to make a new solution, a new project, and I'm going to call it, again, this whole thing, let's say Web Application 4, or we'll call it Web App 4, just to make it different. Okay, if you notice, the name of my project and the name of my solution are the same. And it's going to send up my solution files as well as my project files, right, into the Git repository. I'll create a new Git repository for it, no problem. If I click this create new Git repository here, right, it's going to send everything in there. So I want to unclick this. I want to unclick this because I don't need a Git repository here anymore in my GitHub files, right? Press OK. And now, all right, I have these files. I'm going to create in my web app 4. I'm going to create a new index.html page, right? There it is, and I'm going to save. I know where these files live because I know where I put them. I put them here in my under GitHub, right? I put them under a web app 4. And if I notice, you see all these extra information here I don't need. I have to go here to get my information, but I can't use this as my repository, right? Because this would be bad. Right? So I need to create a separate place for it to go. Well, the best thing to do is create a repository that's online, like it says. So I'm going to create a new repository. Let's call it dummy again, right? And it should probably match. It should probably match the github.io page you're creating. Create repository. And now it says, look, it says set up in desktop, which is what I want to do. So I click set up in desktop, and if I have my application running properly, and of course it does this all the time where it has to reinstall my app, which is perfectly fine. I don't care with it. I'm okay with it, guys. I don't stress out about these kinds of little things, right? But it's because I'm running a virtual machine. It does really weird things. Anyway, it'll do the same thing for you. If you don't have it, it'll install it, just like it's doing it for me, right? Okay, here it is. So it loads my repositories, and it keeps track of all the ones that are there. But I want to add a new one, right? I want to add a new one, and the new one's called dummy, right? So this just launched this thing. But if you notice, if I go scroll down here, right, there is no repository called dummy. It doesn't exist, right? I have to do it again. I have to click that button again. So if I go set up in desktop, right, it should create my dummy repository. If it doesn't do it, as you see, right? So sometimes what you need to do is you need to do this. You say clone. And you can actually look at the path. It looks at your online repositories, which you can scroll through, as an example, to find the repository that you want, which is this one. And you can say clone dummy, right? And then you have to choose where it's going to go. I don't mind putting it here in my GitHub pages. It's just going to be alongside my development work. So I have my development work and I have my production work. This is my production page called dummy, all right? So I'm going to put it inside my GitHub page or my GitHub folders, right? Here it is. So there's no local changes to dummy. That's what I'm looking at right now. And it's linked, it's synced right now with my page online, right? Okay, cool. Now I want to take this link. I'm just going to manipulate it here in File Explorer, right? and I want to go to my GitHub link for dummy. I'm going to find it, and I can do this manually with command line as well if you're interested. Here's the only thing I got here is this .git file, and the .git file basically says, this folder gives me all the information for my version control, right, locally on my system. And I want to do is I want to copy this index.html and any other files, like for example my CSS files, my folders, all the folder structure I need for my production, and drop it into this page here, or into this folder. So here's I'm dropping it in. Here's my index.html now, right? When I do that, if you go back here, it looks like I've got a change here locally in my app. I can see I've got a change, and here locally outside of Visual Studio, I say initial commit added index.html page, or whatever. Then I add that to the commit. Now I have a commit, but it's an unsynced commit, right? And I have to publish it. And I do that all here within my app. As long as I'm connected properly, it's all good. I go back to my GitHub page and I refresh, and then I have my index.html, and that's all I have in my GitHub page. That's my repository, right? So then I can go here, and if this is my github.io page, it would run, because it's not a bunch of other stuff in here. It's just this. And this is my page. And if I want to change it up here, I can change it, do whatever I have to do, and run it or whatever. Any questions around that? So again, if you use Visual Studio because of how fat it is, it gives you extra information that you don't need. And you don't need that level of abstraction. You need to go down a level into the actual project itself, right? Now you could, if you're just lazy, take the whole project folder, go in there, copy everything in there, even extra information you don't need, and if you don't want to pick and choose, and drop it in there. That's okay. As long as it has access, the github.io page has access to your index.html file, and the pathing is all correct, it'll all work. Okay. The problem is when you have to go down a level, GitHub doesn't do that. Yeah.
Would your file paths not change though based on
It won't work. No, it won't. No, it won't change. It won't mess you up. If you move things around in a different order, yeah, it'll mess up, right? But as long as it's in the same relative hierarchy, you're good to go.
You don't need a compilation files as well.
No. Why? If it's just index, look, if all you have is HTML and CSS and JavaScript, you don't need any of that stuff. All you need is the JavaScript side, right? And the basic files. Like you literally could run, if I go to my site, I'll take your question in a second. If you go to my site, as an example, for here locally, right? Here's my local site. And if I go to my local files for Ciliopoulos.github.io, which I have down here somewhere, here it is. It's my local files, right? Inside there, I have, if you drill down in here, I have another layer of abstraction, which is here. Well, this is what I uploaded to GitHub. All this stuff. Now I have a bunch of extra stuff in here that I don't need. Like for example, this CS project.user. I don't need that, but I put it up there anyway because I was lazy. To clean it up, I could take all this stuff out of there. I only included my index.html, my robots.text, my humans.txt, and my Cname. That's got to be up there. I don't need my properties. I don't need my previous, right? I don't need my object, OBJ. I just need my JavaScript. That's all I need, right? I don't need anything that's outside of here, right? And if I double click this here at this level, right, it'll actually run my code, right? That's okay because I don't need this. It's just JavaScript and HTML and CSS, right? Any other questions around this before we get to the other stuff that I have to cover with you today?
For cutting, if you had the index in another file, is that okay to do? Like it would be your sort of like you'd have your first index and then you'd have a folder, and then in that folder have an index so that it's the domain name slash.
As long as your pathing works, it's fine. As long if you point your index, if you redirect yourself, you can redirect your page to anywhere you want, right? Subpages, you can do that. But the challenge is the first one, what GitHub.io is listening for is index.html. It's got to go there first.